You know how just a few years ago electric cars were like a rare thing,
Mm.
and now they're everywhere?
Yeah.
We're get ready for like the construction site version of that.
Mm.
We're going to be diving into the world of electric construction equipment,
Mm.
big battery-powered bulldozers, excavators that are practically silent instead of that roar you're used to.
Right,
We've
right.
got a whole stack of reports, industry analyses, even a case study from Gothenburg in
Uh-huh.
Sweden.
Oh, wow.
And they all paint this really fascinating picture of where this whole sector's headed.
Yeah, what I find really interesting is just how different things are, like, right now compared to where they're predicted to go.
Right.
Like, the difference is huge. It's kind of like if we hopped in a time machine and went back to, when electric cars were just starting out,
Yeah.
except instead of, like, Teslas and Priuses, we're talking, like,
Huh.
excavators and grains, you know?
Yeah, yeah. And speaking of starting out, I got to say, when I first started looking at this stuff,
Huh.
the actual numbers were a little, well, underwhelming. Yeah. Only a little over 7,000 electric construction machines were sold globally last year. That's like less than 1% of the total market.
Wow, less than 1%.
Yeah, it's tiny. So I got to ask, where's all the hype coming from?
I think it's all about understanding how markets, like, adopt these big changes, you know?
Okay.
Even the biggest, most game-changing technologies, they always start small.
I guess that makes sense.
Think about those first electric cars. They were expensive, the range was terrible, and, like, nobody really believed in them.
Yeah, that's true.
But look at them now, and the same things that made electric cars take off. Those are the same things pushing electric construction equipment forward.
Okay, so what, like concern about the environment, better batteries, stuff like that?
Exactly. And don't forget, especially after that Gothenburg study we'll talk about, there's a growing feeling that, this isn't just some passing trend. This is the future of how we build things.
Okay, so we're in that early adopter phase. I get it. But some of these market projections are predicting a $4 billion market by 2028.
Hmm.
That's more than 5 times bigger in just 5 years. So what's driving that optimism, even though it's such a small market right now?
I'd say it's a bunch of factors coming together at once, like a perfect storm.
Uh-huh.
First, there's definitely a growing need, especially for those really big projects like infrastructure and mining.
Right.
And geographically speaking, all eyes are on China.
Yeah, all the reports were pointing to China as like the big player in this, especially for those like mega machines used in mining and heavy industry.
Yeah.
What makes them like the front runners?
Well, it's a few things, really. First off, their construction industry is massive, like way bigger than anywhere else. Plus, their battery requirements aren't as strict as, say, Europe or North America. And of course, they're already leading the charge, so to speak, in battery production and electric vehicles. So they've got a pretty significant head start.
But it's not all about just like how many they're selling, right?
Yeah. Right.
The reports also mentioned that while China's got the lion's share of sales, something like 67%, Europe actually makes up a bigger chunk of the total value, around 39%.
Interesting.
So, like, what does that tell us?
It shows they're approaching it in different ways,
Okay.
China's all about volume, especially with those electric wheel loaders.
Right.
But Europe, they're more into specialized high-tech machines.
And I'm guessing that's because they have, like, tougher emissions rules and they're focused on cities which need different kinds of equipment.
Exactly. So different strategies, but the same goal, to make construction electric.
So we've talked big picture, but let's zoom in on the actual benefits of using these electric machines.
Oh.
And I mean, beyond the obvious, like not spewing out diesel fumes.
Well, yeah, let's not downplay that.
Right.
Cleaner air is huge, especially in cities.
Yeah.
Right? Totally.
Construction in urban areas, it's
Yeah.
just like notorious for noise, dust, and exhaust.
Yeah, it's awful. But electric machines, they're way cleaner and quieter. That's better for the environment, but it's also better for the workers and the people living nearby.
It's funny you mention that because the Gothenburg study actually had some really interesting findings about that.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, like about how much quieter it was.
Oh, absolutely. They found that quieter operation wasn't just like a nice bonus. It actually meant less fatigue for the operators. They could concentrate better, and they just felt better overall.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
And I imagine those quieter machines could also change when and where they even do construction. Like maybe they can work at night without, waking everyone up.
Exactly. It could totally change how we approach urban construction. And then there's the potential cost savings.
Oh, right. Because electricity is cheaper than diesel, right?
Virtually, yeah.
So lower operating costs, that's got to be a big incentive. Although The reports did mention that the initial price tag is a bit of a hurdle.
Yeah, that's the trade-off right now.
Right.
Electric construction equipment can cost almost twice as much as the diesel kind.
Wow, twice as much.
Yeah, and that's a big problem, especially for smaller companies. But
But the price is going to go down, right?
exactly. As the technology gets better and they start making more of them, those prices should come down.
So it's kind of like, yeah, it costs more up front, but you save money in the long run.
Exactly. Short-term cost versus long-term gain.
We haven't even talked about the potential savings on fuel and maintenance, which are typically lower for electric machines.
Oh, right, right. And then there's that whole ESG thing, right? Companies wanting to look good because they're environmentally and socially responsible.
Absolutely. These days, sustainability is a big deal. Having a fleet of electric construction equipment, it sends a powerful message to clients, investors, even potential employees.
Yeah, it's not just good for the planet, it's good for business.
Exactly. It's a smart business move all around.
So, lots of upsides. But it's not all perfect, is it? The reports also mention some pretty big challenges. Oh, for sure. We've talked about the cost, but there's also the issue of charging. You can't just plug a bulldozer into any old outlet, right?
Right.
We need a whole system, especially outside of cities, for this to really work. And then there's the skills gap.
Right. Like you can't just retrain every mechanic who knows diesel engines to suddenly be an expert in electric motors and batteries.
Yeah, it's a real challenge. I mean, it's like going from, fixing a grandfather clock to like repairing a smartphone. Totally different skill sets.
So how do we even start to fix that?
Mm.
Are we talking like massive retraining programs, getting people up to speed?
Yeah, for sure. We need big, comprehensive programs to teach technicians how to work on these new machines. And it's not just mechanics either. Electricians, especially those who know high voltage systems, are going to be in high demand too.
It's kind of exciting though, right? Like a whole new field opening up with tons of jobs.
Absolutely. And it's not just about fixing things when they break. This shift to electric opens up some really cool possibilities for innovation. Like, imagine being able to diagnose problems remotely or even predict when something's about to go wrong.
Whoa, so they practically fix themselves before they break.
Well, not quite, but you get the idea. Less downtime, more efficiency, all thanks to technology.
That's wild. And you know what else really struck me? That Gothenburg case study, they weren't just like messing around in a lab. They were really trying to make this work in the real world.
Exactly. That's what made that study so interesting. It wasn't just theoretical. They were actually putting these machines to work in a real city, seeing how it all played out.
And it sounds like it went pretty well. I mean, they had Volvo construction equipment involved, the city government, even the companies that actually use this stuff every day.
Yeah, it was a real team effort. And one of the biggest takeaways was that electric construction equipment, it works. The machines performed really well, even better than diesel in some cases, so it's definitely viable.
That's great to hear. But they must have hit some snags along the way, right?
Of course, it wasn't all smooth sailing. The study also showed just how important planning is, and not just from the construction companies, but from everyone involved. City planners, manufacturers, everyone needs to be on the same page.
Like you were saying earlier, it's a whole ecosystem that needs to change, not just the machines themselves.
Exactly. For example, think about charging. They had to figure out where to put charging stations so that it would be the most efficient. And it wasn't just about plugging into the grid. They looked at using renewable energy sources, charging during downtime to avoid peak hours, even mobile charging solutions.
Hold on, mobile charging. Like for a bulldozer.
Yeah, like a fuel truck, but for batteries.
That's wild.
It's a way to bring the power to the machines, especially in places where setting up a permanent charging station might be tricky. It just goes to show how much creative problem solving goes into making this transition work.
Yeah, I hadn't even considered that. But all this tech stuff aside, what about the people actually using it? Were the workers on board with switching from their diesel engines?
I mean, there's always some hesitation with new technology, right? But the feedback from the operators was really positive overall. They liked that it was quieter, no fumes to breathe in, and they said the electric machines were smoother and more responsive to operate.
So win-win, right? Better for the environment, better for the workers. It seems like a no-brainer.
It does make you wonder why we haven't switched over sooner. But in all seriousness, as the technology keeps improving and the costs come down, it's going to be harder and harder to justify sticking with the old ways.
For sure. So we've talked about the machines and how this study showed that they're up to the job, but it seems like there's a lot more to it. Like, we need to rethink the whole way we approach construction from the ground up.
You got it. And that brings us to another big piece of the puzzle, one that we touched on earlier, those amazing batteries. Because as we've been learning, not all sparks are created equal.
Right, the batteries. We can't forget about those. It's like the battery is the heart of the whole thing, isn't it?
Exactly. The battery determines how long a machine can run, how powerful it is, even how long it'll last. So picking the right battery tech is a huge deal for any company thinking about going electric.
It really is amazing how something as, like, basic as a battery could have such a huge impact on, the future of how we build things.
It just shows how everything's connected, Like a breakthrough in battery tech for these machines, it could change electric cars, renewable energy, a whole bunch of stuff.
It's like all boats rise with the tide, whatever that saying is. But getting back to the different battery types, we talked about lithium-ion, lead acid, even those solid-state ones, which sound super futuristic.
Yeah.
So, like, what are the big things to think about when you're picking a battery for, like, a bulldozer or an excavator?
Well, it all comes down to finding that sweet spot between how well it works, how much it costs, and, of course, how sustainable it is. Right now, lithium ions in the lead, they're energy dense and they charge pretty fast,
Okay.
but they're expensive, and then there's that whole ethical sourcing thing.
Yeah, we don't want to fix one problem just to create another one.
Exactly. And that's why they're working on other types of batteries. Lead acid, they're not as powerful, but they're cheaper, and we already know how to recycle them, so that's good,
Mhm.
especially for things that don't move around much, where size and weight don't matter as much.
So maybe not the best for a little excavator, but better for, like, a giant crane that stays put.
Exactly. And then there are those solid-state batteries, which could be a game changer. They're even more energy dense, charge faster, and safer too. But they're really expensive to make, so it'll be a while before we see them everywhere.
Sounds like the whole battery world is changing so fast it's hard to keep up.
It really is, and that's what makes this whole field so exciting.
Mhm.
Who knows what they'll come up with next, right?
Right. It's like if you want to know the future of construction equipment, you got to look at where batteries are headed.
Exactly. And it's not just about the tech either. The shift to electric, it could change whole industries, even how we design and build our cities.
We've talked about quieter cities, cleaner air, even construction happening at night without keeping everyone awake. But what about the really big picture? How could this change things in the long run?
Oh, the possibilities are huge. Imagine cities designed from the start with electric construction in mind. Buildings made to be taken apart and reused so there's less waste. Construction sites that actually generate renewable energy, enough to power themselves and even send some back to the grid.
Whoa, so we're not just talking quieter construction. We're talking like a whole new way of living in cities.
Exactly. It's about making things more sustainable, more livable, more resilient for everyone. That's pretty inspiring, if you ask me.
It really makes you think about those construction sites differently. It's not just noise and chaos. It's like a peek into the future where technology and sustainability actually work together.
A future where progress doesn't mean trashing the planet.
Well said. And on that note of, like, optimistic curiosity, I think we'll wrap things up for this deep dive. A huge thank you to you. It's been awesome having you here and picking your brain about all this.
Happy to be here. It's been a great conversation.
And to everyone listening, we hope this deep dive got you thinking about the future of construction. Remember, it's being built right now, and it might be a lot quieter than you think. Until next time, keep those minds curious.